I am going to call the meeting to order. Um, We, we have a optional virtual participation today because we won't be voting on anything. We're just going to be going over the budget and asking questions. So we have, I think, Dale Perkins and Ms. Benson, and then our attorney, Mr. Beasley, are joining us on the virtual. Next week, I think we are going to go to virtual, and that will give everyone the opportunity. We had this here today because of the presentation that we're going to have later, but otherwise, we'll be virtual next week. So without further ado, I'm going to bring the meeting to order, and Ms. Schumo is going to give us the prayer and pledge. Thank you. Amen. Thank you. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Ms. Schumo. Appreciate that. And if everybody would, please turn your microphone on today if you're speaking. I know it's a little hard to hear and a little hard to see with the glasses on with your, so if you'll forgive me for cleaning them off every now. So we now move to the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments or corrections? If not, please vote. Gotta get my pen. Everybody have their little green dot? And it passes 8-0. We move now. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Yes, I am. Sorry about that. I just realized when I went to write down 8-0, I got two people over there. So, Ms. Benson? Yes. And Mr. Perkins? Mr. Perkins? Did we lose Mr. Perkins? Mr. Perkins, are you on mute?
Mr. Perkins, turn it on mute if you can hear on your end. He also has his video off.
I see the mute button from here. We'll have to go on. So it passes 9-0. And I think I was on a meeting last night where the board voted, and I think they ratified. They said they could ratify later. There's been some leniency on voting around the state, so I think if he wants to vote and we change that vote, we can ratify it at the next meeting. I'll let Robert figure that one out. So we move now to open forum. I do not have a pink slip. And we move to item E, which is the 2021 operating budget. It starts on page 5, and I'm just going to have a department head come up for each department, and then the CAC can ask any questions that they want to ask of that department head, and of course, anybody on the virtual camp. And so we'll start with administration. So we'll start with you, Mr. Woody. While he's coming to the podium, I want to thank the CAC for the wonderful questions. We always have great questions, but this year they were outstanding, and I appreciate all the questions. Mr. Woody shared the questions without sharing the asker of the questions, and it was nice to hear those questions and answers, so thank you.
And I
It's
would say
yours.
on behalf of the staff, we certainly appreciate getting those questions in advance. It provides us an opportunity to share that information with each and every one of you. And if it's a more involved question that requires a little bit of research, we're able to do that, provide you more information, a wider breadth of information perhaps, if you make that kind of request, rather than having to rely just on memory or talking off the top of our heads. That's always an advantage. Our format this morning, or this afternoon, is going to be to have individual department heads make their presentations and discuss about their particular department. We'll pretty much follow the format that's in the book. You'll hear presentations, a little discussion about their departments and the activity of their departments, so there's a clear understanding on what part of our overall service is provided under the purview of a particular department. So you have some make some distinctions between our various staff. You know, but sometimes don't always know what all falls under which person. I think that's an advantage. We'll talk about our goals and objectives that are listed in the program as well, and then talk about accomplishments that have been met over this past year or in the process, as well as discuss some plans and targeted accomplishments for next year. Under each division, there's also a list of financial data. We'll try to point out those things that have significantly changed, that are worthy of additional conversation, and then certainly open it up for any questions you might have before we move on to the next speaker. Couple comments I have for overall our FY 21 proposed budget. Is about 4.7% higher in terms of operations expense overall, but we as an organization have been watching very closely and are certainly sympathetic and concerned about our customer base in this area, as it is across the nation, as we've had to deal with COVID-19, whether they're a small business owner or an individual who's having difficulties due to work challenges. So while this organization has been very mindful of that and has put together various policies to try to help our customers during the more difficult portions of this challenge this year so far, we're tightening our belts a little bit and going into next year with a recommendation of a 0% increase in our water and wastewater services. We do have some needs in the sanitation area. I'm sure those will come out in descriptions of our program and discussions with questions you might have. There's a lot of moving parts associated with sanitation that are affecting our recommendation that we do have a 2% increase, however, in sanitation. As you know, we're moving out of the Santa Rosa market partway into the year, but there's also some competing advantages and disadvantages associated with that. So with that, as a few introductory comments, let's begin on page 5, and we'll cover just a couple programs out of the Director's Office as well as the Executive Board. Overall, the Director's Office, our responsibility, the Director's Office, we're the interface between the elected officials and the policymakers and the rest of the staff who provide the day in, day out services. Speaking more specifically for my responsibilities are to be sure that the board's policies are followed and administered and well known to the staff and organization as we provide our services. I also have a responsibility on behalf of the staff to be sure that the board is well aware of the resources needed for us to be able to provide those services, whether they be financial, staffing, equipment and regulatory issues that are facing us. And on behalf of the board, I also oversee and make sure that we are providing good service, timely service, that we're responsive, and that we attend to the needs and questions that we have of our service of our customers. As far as objectives, we try to provide you timely information and thorough information so you can make informed decisions for the board. The need for making those informed decisions are that there's a lot of facts and figures that are important to a decision, not just the emotions of particular constituencies that might address you. You need to weigh in the larger, bigger financial picture, of course, of what it takes to run an organization as complex as the ECUA. As far as targeted goals, some I will point out. We monitor statistics regarding utility services and do what we can to keep rate increases commensurate with CPI wherever we can. You may have heard I made a recommendation, and we'll be talking to the board in the not too distant future about what I believe is a need to have a cost of service rate study performed in order to provide an additional level of financial information in order to help make those kinds of financial decisions. Trying to make those decisions just based on trying to follow the CPI is good and noble, but it makes it a little more difficult to do longer range forecasting when you have regulatory issues you're dealing with, whether it be the I&I based consent order or initiatives for environmental protection related to sanitary expansion projects, septic to sewer, and those types of things that are maybe more of a want rather than a need, depending on what the particular situation is. So we can do some more long-range planning that way. We also certainly are responsible for, and our targeted goal is to be sure that we're complying with our consent order and our I&I reduction program. You'll hear a presentation this morning from Stacy Hayden, our Director of Engineering, on that issue, and hopefully that will bring you up to date and answer questions you might have. We also manage certainly our materials recycling facility. Randy Rudd will have some conversations with you about how that operation is going. It's a challenge in the current environment to make that financially self-sustaining. You know, it's environmentally, it's the appropriate thing to do, and it certainly is less expensive, or there's some cost savings by sending things to market rather than have to pay the tipping fee that we would otherwise have to pay at the County Perdido landfill. But that still is a challenge in the current environment. The amount of funds that we receive for recyclables are always fluctuating. If you look on page 7, a brief summary of the ECUA board's line items. This is just for the board. There's really not too much change in this for next year. In fact, overall, it actually goes down somewhat. We did put a placeholder in for what might be an estimated statutory increase that follows along the same order as what happens with the school board in a given year. Other than that, there's some minor reductions in travel and per diem. Given all that's going on with COVID, we're not anticipating much travel this next year. If there's no questions on that page or program, I'll flip the page to page 8, which is the Office of Executive Director. There's only 2 staff persons, myself and an executive assistant, Sharon Haverhill. But we do overlook quite a few tasks on behalf of the department. Some of the items that I'll particularly point out under legal fees, those are our costs and expenses associated with our outside legal counsel. There is Most of the other items largely stay the same. Salary and benefits costs have gone down over the course of last year. There is a placeholder for new executive director relocation expenses. Actually, the expenses look like they're going to come in around 5,000 or 6,000, not near the larger number that was held. Beyond that, there's not much change from last year. The dues and subscriptions are down at the bottom, I'll say, are associated not only with individual memberships, but also with organization-wide memberships. So Water Environment Federation, we also pay our dues to the Chamber of Commerce out of there. We are a member of the Ellison Park Business Park Board here as well. And we also have memberships with FES and AWWA and NACWA as well. Are there any questions on those two budgets before I turn it over to Patty in Finance?
Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions, this is Lois.
Don't see any other items. Ms. Benson has a couple of questions. Go ahead, Ms. Benson. You're recognized, Ms. Benson.
Ms. Campbell, I couldn't hear.
Yes, you're recognized.
Okay, just a couple of questions. One is, where does our lobbying contract fall in this budget? Should that be in here? I know we're going to have a presentation, but do we have funds for a lobbying contract draft for next year?
Do you remember the answer to that? Pardon me? That is under professional services? Okay. That is in the executive director's budget.
Okay, I just didn't see it itemized.
Yeah. But that as it is currently written is likely lower than what we have anticipated before, so that will probably need an adjustment.
I really love the idea of the cost of service rate study. Is that money in there, because it wasn't itemized in the target goals?
No, it wasn't. I've not made broad changes to targeted goals or budgets from the one that was originally submitted to you, the board, and right about the time that I had arrived. I figured that we would make amendments and make an adoption change at the end for anything that were recommended by CAC and board members.
Okay. Well, I think it's a great idea, and I think it's absolutely time to do that. I wanted to also congratulate you on the moving expenses. When you negotiated that as part of the contract, it sort of took my breath away what moving costs are right now. And you have passed so many tests as executive director, but the fact that you decided that you couldn't spend that much money on moving expenses, even though you were awarded that, and chose to move yourself, was certainly admirable. I think it speaks to the fiscal responsibility that you feel toward this organization. Okay, one more comment about that. When you were hired, one of the things that I think we made clear as a board was that we wanted to create a culture that was customer friendly. And in your short tenure, I have seen changes in the perception of the ECUA because of your demeanor. But would it not be worthwhile to include that as one of the targeted goals, to create a culture within the ECUA that reads as customer friendly? And perhaps it would be worth doing a benchmark survey about attitudes toward the ECUA, and then after 1 year, again, survey our customer base. Now, in thinking about doing that, it may not be the best time to take such a survey because COVID sort of has turned our world upside down, and the results of the benchmark might not be as valid as they might be like 6 months from now. But I still would like to see that as part of our goals. And Madam Chairman, that's all of my questions and comments.
Mr. Campbell,
Good thoughts and comments. Thank you very
do we
much.
have anybody else? Oh, no, Mr. Inkle, sorry.
This one goes to some of the other departments, but it also was reflected in the administration budget. For the previous year, I'm looking at the state pension. Did something change in state pensions, the way that's working? Because I was happening to notice that was a pretty big increase from 2019, 2020. Not so bad going into 2021. But then most of the other departments, that's one of the most significant increases. Was there a reason for that?
Set by the legislature.
I'll answer that.
Yeah.
If you would.
Thank you.
would like. Every year we get basically an automatic increase from the state of Florida. We are part of the state of Florida retirement system, and they tell us what we have to contribute on a percentage basis of a person's gross wages. And so there was a slight increase for fiscal 2021 over what it was in 2020. We were at 8%, and this for the next year is 10% for a regular class employee.
Were we a little behind or something? Because it seemed like it would go with cost of living or something, but like some of them are, it's like anywhere from 15 to, like last year for the first one, the administration was 38% increase. That just seemed like a lot to me.
Well, we have, it depends on the actuarial study that the state of Florida pension system does on what the contributions for all of the member participants is going to be.
So they dictate that.
Yes, they do.
Good questions.
Good question, Ms. Ritz?
Thank you. This is directed to Lois. What does she consider culture base? What items would be in that culture? Because if you're going to either hire a company to put together a culture survey, what would be considered positive things that could be commented on? And when I say positive.
Can you hear that, Lois?
Because I hear that word a lot.
Yeah. I'm only to answer that question.
Thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
If you don't mind. Let's confirm that she also heard the question as well. Ms.
Yeah.
Benson, did you hear that?
Heard.
I could not hear it, I'm sorry.
I think she said a benchmark survey
Yeah,
for
I'm not sure Ms.
culture of
Ritz is-
customer friendly, being customer-friendly culture. It was a benchmark survey, not a culture
Yeah.
survey, so.
I believe, Ms. Fritz, I don't think your microphone was on when you were talking at the
It's
time.
on again.
Okay.
I had turned it off.
And she asked a question if, how changing culture would be measured in a benchmark survey or be itemized in goals or objectives. I see that in two steps, actually. First would be the organizational steps set in place to inculcate what the culture of the organization and those goals happen to be, such as adopting a formal servant leadership approach to how we recruit, hire, and train employees, and have some training associated with that. That can be going on concurrently with what Ms. Benson appropriately suggested, that we need to understand from where we're starting. Get a base survey so we have some feel for what our customer base feels about our services, our attitudes, the way we provide our services, etc. Changing a culture, improving upon a culture of an organization, it's kind of like steering a very large ship. It doesn't happen quickly, but if we have a baseline, then we have some idea of where we're changing to. And over time, then we'll apply some metrics to that, have some measure of whether we're improving. Ultimately, what we're asking for is the general opinions. So those metrics are going to be the scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10. Did you get good service today? Did you feel that your questions were answered appropriately and timely? Those types of opinion feedbacks, because ultimately we live and die based on each individual service and interaction we have with the general public, whether that be at the customer service booth, whether that be on the telephone, whether that be interaction with one of our staff in the field, on the street, in front of somebody's house. Those types of things are really what creates the overall community opinion of whether we're a good community partner or have room to grow and improve.
Thank you. Ms. Schumo?
Two questions. One on just a clarification on the survey. Will we do that on both sides for customers as well as employees?
I can hear you, but not really
Oh,
clearly.
okay. Would,
Thank you.
so, talking about the survey, will we do that for customers as well as employees to find out the environment on both sides?
You
like
make a
that.
very good point.
That's a good point.
Make a very good point. Employees are going to provide better services if they work in an environment that they enjoy and feel appreciated. And so that's a very good point. We should do that.
Okay, and last question, on the budget for professional services, I have two questions. One, that's a drastic change as well. It goes from the 82,000 to the 20. Am I reading that right?
That's what it was in 2019. That does predate me. I'm kind of lost to tell you what happened in 2019, that it was 82 at that particular time. I will say, however, the number that's in, as it was submitted originally in April, at 20,000 really needs to be more like 60 for next year for what we anticipate for professional services. So that line item really should change. I'd have to do some research to tell you what the 82 was in 2019.
And also to mirror Ms. Benson, thank you for, moving, yourself. So will that 13,000, I think? I can't see, new contacts. Is that going to just shift to another line when we get to the final budget? Since it's not the 18,000, would that shift?
Oh, for the moving expenses?
Yes.
Yeah, what isn't expended just goes back to fund balance essentially.
Okay.
I suppose the fact that it is in the budget, there is some flexibility if rental and leases or community relations or some other item within the budget runs a little short, it provides some slack for another item in the budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that money went to U-Haul instead of Mayflower, so. Any other questions?
Mr. Campbell?
I was just gonna speculate that maybe the professional services had to do with the search firm, like, or some of that stuff that we had paid out for.
My understanding, the majority of that was encumbered in the prior year. The only expense that we had from the search firm in FY '20 of late was the additional, the board was kind enough to recognize that they had called our search firm back multiple
Twice, yes.
times, and I think they offered to pay an additional airfare for them,
Yeah.
$400.
Madam Chair and Mr. Woody, the microphones are not very audible on our go-to meetings. If when the staff comes up and does their presentations, when there are questions from the committee members, if the presenter would repeat the question so that we could have benefit of hearing them, please.
Okay, good point.
Thank you. I was going to ask that same question, Ms. Benson.
The prior question had to do with if professional services had any expenses related to the search firm. That was my response. Any other questions
Any further questions?
on those two programs?
If not, I would like to echo Ms. Benson. It's funny when you've been on the board with somebody so long. I had a number 7 written down, improved customer communication. So, and now hers is customer-friendly benchmark survey. So I think we're all worried about the customer. So that's a good thing. And Ms. Schumo, there's some. I really like that you said make it two-way with the employees as well. you know, I did a review before I came here, and we do our reviews of what you've done. We want to know first, what have we done? We give our employees the first stab at the review to say, what have we done for you, and what could we do to make it a better place for you to work? And then we give them a review based on their feedback and ours. So I like that, and I do like for our employees to get to weigh in on that benchmark as well. Thank you, Mr. Woody. I echo Ms. Benson that it's very refreshing to have you here.
Thank you.
We move now to finance. And I guess Ms. Shelton is going to come up and answer any questions and give our presentation.
Okay. Finance starts on page 9, and I'll just kind of give an overview. We're comprised of 4 different divisions. We have finance administration, general accounting, accounts receivable, and purchasing and stores. We have 36 staff members, 6 of which of us have accounting degrees. We have 2 CPAs on staff, myself and Justin Smith, the assistant finance director. And we have a certified professional payroll person who's helping process payroll. So we're responsible for all aspects of the financial accounting system, including the budget preparation, expense and revenue forecasting, monitoring, investing, recording financial transactions, and financial reporting. We pay all the vendor invoices, maintain the general ledger financial records, process payroll, produce required financial statements and reports for the ECUA board. We are responsible for the meter reading and generating customer billing, as well as collecting all of the ECUA revenue. Some of our goals are to provide sound financial management, strategic financial planning, asset control in order to support effective decision-making and ensure responsible stewardship for ECUA resources. We strive to provide accurate, detailed records of revenues and expenditures, bill all the customers accurately, and pay vendors and employees accurately and timely. A couple of targets that we focus on. For 2020, we have already noticed a 3% increase over this same time period last fiscal year for the number of vendors that we have signed up to receive their payment electronically. So that's something we're always striving for. It's a 2021 goal as well, is to, again, try to get a 5% increase in the number of vendors we pay electronically. And for our billing division, we're constantly trying to get customers to use the payment portals and pay electronically as well. So we've seen a 7% increase in that so far this year. So fortunately, we're seeing increases each year as